Hi folks, this is John from Sharp Mountain Games, and today we're going to talk about how you can tweak any role-playing game to play it solo. Plus you can save money because you won't need to buy new books. Let's talk about it after the intro. So maybe you'd like to try solo role-playing, but you don't know, well, what book should I buy? What system should I use? So here's your good news. You don't need to buy anything. You can simply take one of your existing systems, tweak it a little bit, and you're good to go. Now, let me just say this. If you have the money and you want to buy a specific solo game, hey, go for it. I'm all for supporting creators, especially independent creators, so that's certainly fine. But maybe you don't feel like buying a book right now, or you don't have the extra cash. Times are tough for all of us. So let's look how we can work with what we already own. Now, I should say a word here on my philosophy. My philosophy is always simpler is better. And especially as a solo GM, you have a lot to keep track of. You're keeping track of both PCs and NPCs. So there's automatically a double cognitive load. When I'm just running for other people, I don't have to keep track of their hit points, and I don't have to keep track of their spell lists and things like that, or special abilities. All I have to do is worry about the NPCs. So if you're doing both, that's, a huge strain. So for me, streamlining is always my goal. I really want my solo time to be relaxing, not bean counting. Now, if you're somebody who wants to go total crunchy and play things rules as written, that's fine, of course. You do what you want to do. But for me, it's going to be streamlining. So if you want to take any role-playing game, first thing I would suggest is streamline the character sheets or the character stats themselves. Many RPGs, they have complicated character sheets. Take a look at the 5e character sheet. And even in some older games, it's not like they were super less complicated. There's always been a certain level of crunchiness in many, many games. So there's a few options. One option is to have one main character, maybe with the full stats, and a simplified sidekicks. And a certain game even has sidekick rules. I'm sure there's others. And I think there's some good literary precedent for going that way, for just a player and their sidekick, or, a buddy game, like Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, Conan and Red Sonja, Han Solo and Chewbacca. There's certainly a lot of pairs in literature. But I want to say maybe go one further. Make all your characters using the sidekick rules. This would really work just fine. And if your particular game doesn't have sidekicks, you could just eliminate some things easily and get them kind of down to that level. Here's another thought. You could use ability checks rather than having to have a huge skill list and constantly think, okay, what skill would I roll? What would I need? I think the old Star Wars game famously had jet backpacks and rocket backpacks as separate skills. Well, that seems a little redundant. So a super easy way is to, you just do your ability scores. They become broad skill groups. Now, you might say, well, that's not letting my character be differentiated. Well, here's one way to do it. Only have appropriate characters make the rolls. So Rangers are going to roll wisdom to track. Not a wizard. Everybody's not going to roll wisdom and then we'll see who succeeds. That's not the way to do it. Scientists will roll intelligence to analyze alien atmospheres. Whereas maybe your engineer would use intelligence to, fix something or create a new device as needed. So only the character who should be making that roll, where it makes sense for that particular character and their skill set, makes the roll. Like I said, the ability scores, they just kind of become buckets to hold all these particular skills. So streamlining the character sheets may seem like, I got to do a little bit more extra work before I begin to play. Sure, but it'll play off during the session when you don't have to be fumbling around with the rules. And speaking of the rules, maybe streamline the rules. One thing to consider maybe is to use hits rather than hit points. Now, the Star Trek Adventure solo game, which I also reviewed a while back, uses kind of a 3 strikes and you're out for human-sized opponents. You might say, well, what if I'm fighting something bigger, like a dragon or something, or a big alien? Well, you could just say, well, they need 5 hits to get taken out, or 10 hits. Or maybe a small creature like a goblin or a mook, maybe they're taken out with 1 hit. And so that takes away the roll for damage. It's one less thing off your plate. And if you could skip feats, I think that's a really good idea. Maybe just use advantage or disadvantage as a bonus. If you don't use advantage and disadvantage, just use a +2 or +4, whatever you think is reasonable. And say, yeah, that's reasonable. The thief might be swinging from the chandelier. The wizard, probably not so much. So there's really ways around that to say, yeah, this seems reasonable for this character class, or this character background. And you don't need to have, this huge feat list and what does it do and how does that work? Oh, and here's another thing about streamlining the rules. Because you're probably saying, I don't have time to go through the D&D 5e rules or the Traveler rules or whatever your system is and rewrite all this. You don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And I don't have that time either. Don't worry about having everything perfect. Just as you go, hack things as you go, and you can always fix it if it doesn't work perfectly, the next time you do it. If you want to keep a few little notes about things you changed, you absolutely can do that. So always consider the rules streamlining a work in progress. And if this is a solo game, who's watching? Who cares? If it's not quite 100% perfect, but you had a good time and you tried something new and it gave you a little bit of relaxation after a hard day at work or a hard week at work, that's great. It can absolutely be a work in progress. You might be tweaking it forever. Here's another way you can really get a lot of mileage out of things you already own for your solo games. Use the sample adventures in the books or published adventures. You already own them. I already own them. And they're also a great way to test your streamlining. If you streamline your characters or you streamline the rules, use these adventures. And you can modify and adapt them. For example, in my Star Trek solo game, I've used things from Star Frontiers, from my other Star Trek books, and they work absolutely fine. Like the Star Frontiers maybe is a little too combat heavy, so I had to make a few little adjustments. But absolutely, get some money out of what you already own. No need to worry about, I need specifically this particular solo engine. Now, if you're getting anything out of this video, let's take a little pause here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It just seemed like a good time to talk about that. Now, if you're using published adventures, scale them down a bit, or think about that, especially if you're using only 1 or 2 characters. And as we said, that's certainly a valid way to go for solo role-playing, rather than having to I wouldn't keep track of a group of 6 characters. Usually for solo, the most I do is maybe 4, and sometimes not even that many is a good idea. Sometimes 3 is better. So don't think about trying to battle 10 to 15 orcs in the Caves of Chaos. No, have your 1 or 2 characters. Maybe they're trying to track down a couple of orcs who've been raiding some local farms, and either you want to scare them off or whatever needs to be done to them. And you might say, but I want to play something epic, and this is going to make it kind of small. I don't know that it has to. I think it can actually make the adventure a little bit more personal and the stakes higher with fewer characters. And even in my own gaming, that's something I'm thinking about more. If I'm solo role-playing, how can I try and get these characters, involved in the adventure the same way you would if you were trying to write an adventure, for a fellow player. And also if you're using a smaller scaled down adventure, or just cutting out some things a little bit, your individual characters can maybe get a little more screen time than if you're trying to run a big group of 6, and then you're ending up almost doing solo wargaming rather than solo role playing. Here's another option too. You can just take your published books, things you already own for solo role playing, and just use the setting. So maybe you really want to play in the Star Frontier setting. I have a lot of nostalgia for that. But you're having trouble paring down the mechanics. For example, Star Frontiers is great, but it can be a little bit fiddly. There's all kind of different defensive screens and energy units that you have to keep track of for your blasters and all. So there is a little bit of fiddly stuff that might make it not so good for solo role-playing. That's fine. Just use the setting and the species, and then run it with some other solo mechanics that you like, either that you got from another game or maybe bought a solo game, and that's certainly fine. So just convert and adjust things as you go. Don't waste a lot of your prep time, stopping you from actually playing. So let's summarize and wrap all this up. I think many RPGs can be easily adapted for solo play. Personally, I'm a big fan of streamlining things. You could certainly go rules as written and rules crunchy or as rules light as you like. Or you could start out with the rules and as you're going say, well, maybe I don't need to worry so much about that. And playing published systems and adventures, it's a great way to really learn them, especially if you eventually want to run them with a group of people. I found that if I run an adventure solo and then I later run it, in a face-to-face or an online game, man, I know that adventure inside and out. I know where a lot of the pitfalls are. Now, players may still surprise me, as they should. I mean, that's exactly what it should be. But the solo really helped me get it right, you could say, the first time. So let me know in the comments what you do to adapt systems and adventures for solo play. And stick around to see what else Sharp Mountain Games is up to. And thank you so much for watching. So here at Sharp Mountain Games, we have a few adventures in print, such as the Star Mermaid, the Dwarven Pickup Truck, and the Sky Tree, and you can check those out at Amazon, Lulu, and drivethrurpg. Also over on drivethrurpg, we have a number of other adventures and character classes, and even some stock art. On Roll20, we have some map packs and character cards, so you can check those out if you're interested. And as always, please like and subscribe, and we hope to see you again real soon.